My name is Scott Traylor. I'm the Children's Media Association president for the Bay Area chapter. And as many of you may know, CMA is a nonprofit organization that supports professionals working in the kids' media landscape. Our Bay Area chapter is unique as a chapter from New York and LA and other chapters to come, where we focus mostly on interactive media, technology, software, electronic toys, research, and even venture investment. And as long as all those things touch on the children's space. If you're a CMA member, thank you very much for attending, and thank you so much for your support. For those that are not members, know that we're able to bring you great speakers and events and presentations through the membership dues of becoming a member. If you're not a member, we encourage you to become a CMA member, and specifically, if you work in the interactive industry, to consider joining the Bay Area chapter. I'm really excited about our speaker today, Mark Schlichting. You would not know this, but this has been a presentation many years in the making, hoping to bring it to CMA, and finally we have the opportunity. And I first met Mark, it had to be like maybe 20 years ago. We were both working on a project together. Mark from San Francisco.
25, I think, Scott.
Maybe 25. Mark was working in San Francisco and I was living in Boston at the time. And we were both working on an interactive product for Bear in the Big Blue House, then owned by Jim Henson and Company. And since then, our paths have crisscrossed all over the world, and I keep seeing Mark's work and learning wonderful, great things, and I'm excited to have him here today for his presentation. Mark has worked on many amazing interactive products for kids over the last 3 decades and is currently the Chief Creative Officer for Canoe, a startup based in the Bay Area. And with that, as just to get started, why don't I hand the microphone over to Mark? And Mark, and you can tell us a little bit more about your work and about the presentation to come. And I'll share a link to Canoe in just a second if people want to check it out.
Thank you, Scott. And hi, everybody. Glad to see you. And I see a lot of old familiar faces here, or young familiar faces, I guess. And I'm just going to go ahead and start and make sure that everybody can see this. So my name is Mark Schlichting, because everybody often gets that wrong, although Scott did a great job of it. And I'm the CEO of Noodleworks Interactive. And we're consultants that help other companies create delightful apps and toys for kids. I started way back in the days of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, where I was an animator. And then I created living books at Broderbund. And so for over 30 years, I've been studying children's play patterns and what turns a simple click or tap into a magical experience. And for the past 3 years, I've been a co-founder and chief creative officer at Canoe, where we connect grandparents and grandchildren through a special video chat with fun activities for them both to do together. Trying to hook them up. You know, we were looking at the problem of when you try and talk to a 4-year-old, my own grandchildren being the case, they say, you ask, how are you doing? And they go, fine, and they're gone. And then the parents spend the time following them around with the camera because the kids are not really engaged. And so what we did was create a company where the grandparents and actually any older loved one could create with the kids a meaningful interaction and play together. And we went from 5 minutes phone calls, this is what most people told us about, to 30 minutes even after our first couple of tests. So that was a big thing for us. And then more recently, we built a wand that works inside our service. And so you can go fishing and make cookies with grandma and what, by actually doing actions where you're mixing it up and cutting the butter and that sort of thing. And we've more recently moved this over to where we're outside of the service, where we can also use it for books and activities on its own. And we've just begun using our wand with highlights for children's High Five magazine. And it's really quite fun. It's interesting, you know, switching over from interactive to toy and audio interaction. So that's been what I've been working on more recently. And then some years ago, I I created this book. And it took me a while because the industry kept changing, but it's really sharing what I learned over the decades working on children's products and media. And I didn't do it thinking that I would get rich. I did it as a gift to you because you're the next generation of children's media designers. So my talk today covers a few highlights from the book. And I hope you like it. And here we go. Thinking like a child. It was interesting when I wrote, I actually wrote this as thinking like a kid, and Scott changed it to thinking like a child because I think he was afraid it wouldn't work with the international people who think of kids as goats. So anyway, thinking like a child for greater product engagement. So as designers, we need to practice thinking like a child, and we need to better understand a child's developmental age and therefore their viewpoint on the world. We need to understand the powerful, attractive nature of play patterns and how to invite a child's attention and then keep them engaged once we have it. So here we are. As adults, we forget what the world was like when we were small. Often when we think about being kids, we actually think about being 7 and up. We forget those very early years. And when we were young, our cognitive abilities were still coming online. And it's no wonder kids are trying to figure it out. They're no wonder they're always asking why. Why this? Why that? Why is that? So connecting with that experience and who they are is key to making good product. When we were young, we were not experts at being in the world. We were still figuring out basic things like, where do the lights go when you turn them off? And making new connections as best we could, moment by moment. And sometimes when you ask kids, you get the most amazing stories about why they think things happen. So kids have a fresh perspective, a beginner's mind, if you will, on the world around us. And that perspective is profoundly charming and sweet. And is very non-adult. And often this is what we forget when we begin designing. So how do we tune ourselves to the level of interest and awareness of our young users? A really good way is understanding ages and stages of development. So, it helps to connect with our audience, and each age group really has their likes and dislikes, and cognitive skills, humor, challenge, and social interaction change dramatically by age. So these are both technically children, but their thinking process and interests are very different. This is a 4-year-old on the left, and I think it's between a 9 and 10-year-old, they say, on the right. But the developmental difference between them is staggering. And over the years, many companies have come to me saying they're going to build a kids network. And I say, oh, great. And when I ask what the target age is, they say confidently 4 to 14. And I know that sounds great to them in terms of marketing and to their investors, but actually it doesn't really work because one size does not fit all. And if they make a product that works for the 4-year-old, the 8-year-old will think it's baby stuff. And if they make a product that works for the 8 or 9-year-old, it may be too scary or have too much conflict or too much aggression for the younger kids. So it doesn't really work that way. Our friend on the left is what we call, he's in the magic years. That's before logical linear thinking is fully developed, which usually happens around age 7. So reindeers on the roof and tooth fairies, this age group buys it all. Not so for our other friend, who is no longer in the magic years and is deep in the process of rejecting baby stuff and figuring out who he is while building an identity. The 4-year-old is in an egocentric stage, and I don't say that in a bad way, that's what it's called, as it's hard for him to think from another person's point of view yet. You ask him, oh, what would your mother like for her birthday? And he's likely to say, Power Rangers, because he can't yet figure out what he wants. But the older child can guess, oh, flowers, candy. You've seen this happen before. Our younger friend does not yet understand metaphors or sarcasm. They don't get it at all. And, when they hear somebody kick the bucket, what does that mean? That means they literally kicked the bucket. But our older kid, sarcasm is is really important. It may even be, it's a big part of his life, and it may even be social currency among his friends. So there's this huge gap. So if you don't understand ages and stages, you're going to have trouble really connecting and seeing through the eyes of these different kids. But what both kids are interested in is play, whether real world, digital, or even just watching it. Play has these deep biological roots. Part of understanding kids is understanding play itself. All mammals play. It's deeply wired into the mammalian part of our brain. And it's back to some of the best parts of us, the parts that care about others. You know, if you move a mother mouse away from the babies, their heart rates change because they're having limbic regulation. And you put it back and then their heart rates go back up. There's a whole lot of information about how mammals are really because we care about our children, because we care about other people. That's our mammalian part. Your pet lizard won't ever go and fetch the ball for you because they're all lizard brains, all reptilian brains. So when your dog is on the other end of that old sock, he's not tugging because he wants the sock. He's tugging because he wants to play. This is really a sign of the mammalian brain. And as humans, as a species, we could play for millennia, long before we ever had language, because play is how we are wired to learn about the world. So understanding play patterns is really key for engagement. So play patterns are universal, and kids step into them naturally. I've seen kids in train stations who are from different cultures and don't speak the same language begin a game while standing around with their parents, only because they are the same size and because they want to play. You don't need anything else. So these two scientists are learning about gravity and viscosity and impact and sound, the nature of water. And what they are doing is playing. No one had to say, oh, will you go jump in that puddle? They just go and do it naturally. So tuning into play patterns is paramount in making good interactive design. And there are dozens of play patterns. Here, I'm going to give you a few examples. This first one is about mastery play. The first time we go down that slide, we kind of sat up there for a while and thought, dang, it's a long ways down. Am I going to get hurt? I'm going to have to give up control. You hesitate. We're probably scared, although it's hard to remember that far back. But you've seen other people do it, other kids do it, and eventually, with the encouragement of others, we throw caution to the wind and we go down. Whoa, what a rush. The beginning of mastery play, and it leads to experimentation. And we go down again. And pretty soon, we're going down upside down and backwards, and that leads to, I remember my friends going, okay, let's, what happens if we try and ride our skateboards down the slide? It was disastrous and fast, but it's where that kind of mastery goes. You want to go to the next place. Another kind is make-believe play. And it allows us to use our imaginations to explore social interactions, try on archetypes. It could be a superhero or a fireman or different roles just to see how they fit. And this is, as I was saying about play patterns, kids just fall into these naturally. They want to put on those shoes. It's really common for little kids, for a 2-year-old, to put on their dad's shoes and walk around in them because they're experimenting what it's like to be dad. And here, we have what happens in these sort of situations is they overlap. So play patterns often, several are going on at once. So you have physical play going on here. And you have object play where they're playing with the seesaw. And you have social play, all happening at the same time. So understanding and tapping into play patterns helps us make better games, toys, and movies. Here's another building pattern. Another pattern rather on building. And it's a very natural, it's a big pattern. It's a very basic pattern. And it's made Logo one of the biggest and beloved toy companies in the world. They just tap into this building pattern. And what happens in this pattern is this. Well, especially with boys, they tend to knock it down. They build it and they knock it down, and they build it and they knock it down. I've watched this in daycare centers. I've watched it all over. I watched it with my own grandkids. And so then you have companies like Rovio, the game designer Jaco Isalo, used this part of the pattern to create a multi-million-dollar franchise, Angry Birds. The backstory is that the birds are angry because the pigs stole their eggs, in case you didn't know. And knocking down the pig's house is the game's goal. It's your job to knock down the pig's house. And there's a reason to do it, because they were bad pigs. And even when you knock them down, if you didn't get all of them, they're snarky and they make noises at you like ha ha, and drive you to come and try again to get them. Another one is Minecraft. This is a huge building activity, and which allows anyone to build their own world brick by brick, and then connect to other people in the world, creating a shared social creative environment, all based on building play. Our daughter had her own server for years just to play Minecraft on. And she had kids that she played with all over the world, all the way from Australia. And, she was what, 8 or 9 at the time. And it was amazing the stuff the kids would come up with. There was that kid in Australia figured out that he could take a blank block like a window and then print a design inside the window. And so he was making stained glass windows. It's not part of the program. He just figured out how to do it. And pretty soon they were building rooms full of stained glass windows. So it's just amazing how when you're following out a play pattern, the kids get creative, they go deeper into it and make more. Scott, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mark, keeping with that play pattern of building up towers and knocking them down, that is a feature that most people don't know is in Minecraft as well.
That's right. Thank you. Because, hey, it's what happens. So another play pattern that you're probably familiar with is fantasy. And we talked about it a little before, and it takes many forms, from dress up to playing with Barbie and G.I. Joe figure play. And it really goes almost any place your imagination takes you. I was just hanging out with my 4.5-year-old grandson, and we were out in the backyard, and he was jumping around between things, and then he turned to me and said, "Okay, that's lava. You can't step on that part." And we've all played that lava game in our houses. We had to jump between the furniture, probably. But that's another kind of fantasy play where they just make up rules, and then they make up games for themselves in the process. Now, Toca Boca used this to create Toca Tea Party way back in the early days of iPads. And it actually helped save their company because their sales numbers were so great just from this one product. And if you haven't played it, it's very interesting because there's no instructions. But when we were testing our app, Noodle Words, which is about what if words were toys, we often had to have several 4 and 5-year-olds waiting around in the wings. So I would give the kids that were waiting around an iPad with Toca Tea Party on it. And they would go off and play it together in co-play. And because it's intuitively well designed, these young players would set the table. They would pick the desserts, the drinks, they would change the radio. If they spilled something, they could clean it up. And they really enjoyed this fantasy play together. About 15 or 20 minutes later, they would return the iPad to me, very pleased, telling me that they also figured out how to wash the dishes. So they're just following out a natural play pattern. And Toca Boca and its sister company, Sago Mini, regularly design really great activities around known play patterns. I would say almost all of their products are based around them. And I've always been a big fan of their stuff. So to support play patterns, you have to learn about play patterns. You have to support the kids wanting a desire for agency and control. Kids expect reactions to their own actions. Kids are willing to put up with a lot of bad design, but they really want is something that they can go into and really have control over. They expect reactions to their actions, just like the real world, and they want to explore. So let them. You got to follow. If you give them the opportunity to follow their interests, they will. Just like we were talking about with building. All of a sudden, they're building unusual things. They're doing things with the product you didn't expect, and then hey, they want to knock it down too. Let it go all the way through. So drives that exploration. It's beyond play patterns. It's that they have a natural curiosity about the world, and it gets their attention. So the first thing kids want to know is, what's that? And then they want to know, what's it do? And then they want to know, well, what can I do with it? And they're just driven deeper and deeper into learning. You know, I remember, God, who's the author? She was talking about taking her kid off as a children's writer. And she was taking her kid, they went to a camp so that she could get to play tennis because she'd never taken a vacation. And she was taking her 3-year-old to a really happening daycare center. And they took 3 steps out of their apartment trying to get to her tennis lesson. And the kid stops and squats down and goes, oh, a bug. Because it was this really cool tropical bug. And she's Anne Lamont. And she says, going somewhere with a 3-year-old is like going somewhere with somebody on acid, because they're just so engaged at everything in the world. So what can I do with it? And then, you know, it doesn't really matter if it's in the real world or it's in the digital world, because if it's engaging, if it has curiosity, if it sparks their curiosity, then they're going to go farther and deeper into it and want to play with it. So part of this is about getting kids' attention. And, you know, here's a screen from Highlights magazine that we've been playing with recently. And, you know, even though loud or unusual noises can get their attention, you know, we as humans are primarily visually orientated animals. So interesting images draw us in. Did you just start driving into this image and try to take it in? Did you try and find something already that was hidden in the picture? We can't not do it. This is that part about being attractive. There's a lot going on in this page from Highlights High Five magazine. And not only are we tasked with finding hidden objects, a game in itself, but there are little stories happening between the characters. This is visually very attractive to kids and to adults. My favorite thing about getting kids' attention is animation. And I've been using it for years because if it moves, it's alive. You immediately care about the characters. It immediately has your attention. And for kids, those characters are alive. When we were building our app, Noodle Words, one that Barbara and I created, which is based on the idea of what if words were toys, we just periodically would wiggle the main word on the screen. And just to let kids know that it was alive for them to touch. That's all I had to do was wiggle. And the kids knew it was alive and intuitively would dive in and start interacting with the product. So animation is really another important thing in for getting their attention. And then the next piece is keeping their attention. Because getting a child's attention once is pretty easy, but keeping it and supporting it authentically is harder. So child psychologists talked about the process of disequilibration in learning. Disequilibration is a kind of stimulus to our attention. And disequilibration is a process. So you go you're disequilibrated, it's like being pushed off center, and then you begin assimilation, and then you make accommodations for what you've done, and it brings you back to equilibration. So think about when you were learning to ride a bike. It's got your full attention. You're constantly looping through the cycle of being disequilibrated, assimilating what just happened, accommodating, and then back to equilibration. And in learning processes, we use this a lot in learning activities where small disequilibrations in small bites really improve the learning performance. So when you're encountering new information in smaller pieces, it makes it easier for kids to integrate the new material and bounce back the equilibrium. Off and on, off the center, on center, off center, on center. And they're soaking it up as they go along. And for those of you who are into learning theory, with the help of Dad here, we also see an example of what Lev Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, which talks about what a child can do on their own or what they can do in collaboration and guidance with others. And in all the products that we do, I'm not talking about it too much here, but learning theory really plays a big part in keeping kids' attention. So another one of my favorites is adding occasional surprises. And it's a great way to support disequilibration. And also, from Skinner's point of view, for adding intermittent reinforcement. When engagement starts to flag a little bit, you can get kids more engaged. And we know that when you have an interactive product and you click on it, and it always does the same thing, the younger kids will continue to do it a few times because they're learning new things each time. But older kids will do it once. And if it does it again this next time, they're out of there. But if it does something different, then they have to go, oh, wait a minute, there's more here. There's more I don't understand. There's more I haven't explored. So it brings them back in again. And surprise is one of my favorite pieces of magic because often the parents usually enjoy it as much as the kids. So Startle Surprise is the one that makes you jump. We learned that when we were, again, looking at surprise, we realized that there were several kinds, besides bad surprises, I'm talking about good surprises here. Not like getting your, a tax audit or something, but good surprises are really good at keeping your attention, and there's more than one kind. So this is Startle Surprise. And it talks to our ancient reptilian brain. It's hardwired and used in every scary movie you've ever seen. When you think the monster is finally dead and the music chills out. So you can think of it like the Jack in the Box. You know it's coming, but it makes you jump anyway. Another kind is Amaze Surprise. And Amaze Surprise is kind of the wow moment. And it can happen in movies, but in interactive media, it's powerful because it's a child's own actions that have the ability to create a much larger or different reaction than was expected. This is really about user empowerment. Wow, look what we just did. Look what just happened. Look what I just made happen. And then a surprise is this one, the epic win. It's a scenario of itself. It's a scenario of epic win. And I love it a lot because game designer and author Jane McGonigal, you might know of, describes the experience this way. An epic win is an outcome so extraordinarily positive. You had no idea it was possible until you achieved it. And when you get there, you are shocked at what you are truly capable of. The epic win. And you just see it on their faces. They're just amazed and powerful. Will this make them want to come back and play again? Yes, it will totally. Another one is Insight Surprise. This is not about shock, as with amazement or the previous one, but it's that brilliant moment of understanding or insight. It's the aha moment. It's a kind of mini Satori. Or it could be the moment of enlightenment. It's how things work together. good insight surprise, but from designers, sets the conditions for kids to make the connections themselves. We lead them along the path, and then they put the pieces together, and they get this kind of surprise. And because they've learned it, because they did it themselves, because they have ownership, it takes them on to continue to be more involved. And then the last one is humor surprise. And we may not usually think of humor surprise as humor as a surprise, but it's the shock of the unexpected punchline that makes it funny. Psychologists think of humor surprise as a kind of cognitive mismatch. They call it a categorical mistake. It's like a square peg in a round hole. Jokes have punchlines for surprise. And in storytelling, it's the plot twist. The storyteller weaves a perception of specific events and places, gaining the listener's involvement through their imagination. The audience unconsciously anticipates the final arc of the story and makes the leap to the end and what the conclusion will be. Surprise and delight comes when the story takes an unexpected turn and winds up off the road in a ditch, different than our expectations. And it's all done with punchlines and plot twists and slapstick. And of course, slapstick, which is a visual humor, is a real favorite with almost all kids. So there's this story about the 4 kids who were at the circus. And at one point, a clown comes right up to them and says, "Hey, kids, what's your favorite part of the circus?" And they're kind of mind blown. Clowns can be a little scary. Here's this big painted face up in here. They're very disequilibrated, and they don't know what to do, and they're kind of tongue tied for a moment. And then one of the kids says, "I like the elephants." And the clown says, "Oh yeah, the elephants. They're my favorites. They're the best kissers in the whole circus." And then you can imagine the kids are disequilibrated again. And how do you even kiss an elephant? What part do you kiss? And again, we're enjoying the power of surprise through humor. So surprise is powerful in terms of engagement. So you want to use it when it naturally works, and especially when it is generated by the kids' actions. Them making it happen will bring them back again and again, just to do it again. They'll play it again and again just for the same surprise, because it worked for them, just the way the Jack in the Box gets you. So to think like a kid, we want to get to know our target audience well. That's why ages and stages are important. You want to invite curiosity and kid control. You always want to make an invitation to invite them in. And when they get in, you want to give them the control to explore it. Play is how kids intrinsically learn. Play patterns are just incredibly important. In fact, as a design consultant for other companies, almost what I do, all of my gigs are helping people fix problems they have. Sometimes it's creating new things, but often it's figuring out that we got a product. AA had a problem with a Harry Potter game where they spent millions of dollars on it and it wasn't working for the kids. And in half an hour, I could go in and tell how they weren't supporting the kids' play patterns. That when you support the kids' play patterns, then everything falls into place and all interactive media works. So understanding and learning about play patterns is really important. You add surprise and delight and interest to keep them engaged. And, it's that little spark, it's that little hit of dopamine that makes you want to come back and play a little more. And kids are our teachers. We have to listen to them. I remember in a conversation with an executive at Nickelodeon who said, every time I think I know who kids are, we drive into a ditch. That they have to go back and talk to the kids again. Focus testing and play testing with kids is crucial. They're going to teach you something that you would never imagine. Even in our own products, I was totally surprised. Oh, wait a minute, we have to change all that because this is how they're actually using it, not how I thought they were using it. And lastly, please play more yourself. we get so busy with our tied up in our lives that we forget to play. So I'm inviting you all to take a little time to play yourself and understand what play means to you. So thank you. And I'm happy to take some questions for a little while here. And
thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Mark. That was great. And I know we have a handful of questions already, and feel free if you have others to enter them into the chat. Ariel, could I hand it over to you?
You definitely can. All right. Yes, we have quite a few. 1 second. Let me just open it. Loading very slowly. Okay, so Mark, you gave a great example about applying play patterns to products like Boca Boca Tea, Party, and Roblox. Are there other applications of play patterns that you could call out that you enjoy?
Oh, off the top of my head, I can't think of one, just being not quite prepared, but again, it's like what I look for when kids are playing. Are we supporting their play pattern or are we not? When we were building Noodle Words, we have a little box on the screen and you get the next word to play with by clicking on the box. And it does a little movement when it pops up. And the first thing we saw was that kids were coming in and going, bang, 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 bang. They were rapid tapping, which we didn't expect. And when it came up, it would crash the program because it was trying to drive so many animations at once. And the programmer said, oh, I can fix that so they can't do that. And I said, no, I want you to fix it so it doesn't crash, because that's a play pattern that just showed up. And we want to be able to do that. We had the same thing when I was designing living books, where you could click on all the words in sequence, because we realized that the younger readers were building, or they were mapping, it's called, mapping the sentences. We went to the beach, just grandma and me, and the older kids were playing them out of order. But then they would tap on them really fast and it would interrupt. Ba, 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 ba. And they said, I can make it so they can't do that. And I said, no, they're playing with it. If they want to go ba, 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 baby, and rap with it, that's fine with me. So really it's looking while you watch the kid testing to see what is their main thing.
Oh, amazing. The next question comes from Kim Jacobson. Hi, Karen, and hi, Mark. Have you played around with mixed reality with kids, augmented reality, in parentheses? Any thoughts on this new frontier of creativity and interaction?
I thought it was going to be the next big thing 6 years ago. We were on these cycles of 7 years where we went from floppy disks to CD-ROMs to the internet to virtual, to worlds like Club Penguin. And then we got the iPad. And so like every 7 years, there seemed to be something new. But we haven't quite gone off into the virtual worlds yet. And there's so much opportunity for it. I think there's a lot of resistance from parents to have their kids kind of zone out on them. I think that when we have several units in a house at once and you can go explore environments with your family, that it's going to be stronger. I've certainly spent time in there playing in virtual worlds and had a lot of fun with it. But I think we aren't quite there yet, especially in the kids space.
Very good. Cool. Yeah. Our next question comes from, I might not say your name right, Egul. What if disequilibration, I also probably butchered that, detracts from keeping kids playing? How to keep encouraging kids when things don't work out the right way, or if they keep losing at the game?
Disequilibration is not about having bad design. Disequilibration is about having a surprise of some sort or learning. All of those examples of surprise were all different kinds of disequilibration that help you to be further engaged. It doesn't take away from the game, it adds to the game. If you're having a disequilibration that isn't working, then that's bad design. Hope that answers it.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. And then the next one, I think this is one of our CMA hosts, I'm guessing Terry or Karen, says, Mark, how do you see kids evolving in this digital age when it comes to play?
Well, it's a really interesting problem. We're seeing with the a lot of parents these days a real rejection of interactive play, and because they don't want kids attached to the screens, and they're worried about that. And we know that. I mean, one of the things that we've done, one of the things about our little thing, and I won't start it because it makes noise. Our wand from Canoe is that we're looking at creating movement. So what can we learn from movement? And can we do magic spells? And can we go fishing? And can we make things? And so we built a whole set of activities on the wand by itself. It comes with a little booklet of ideas and things that's just about interactive audio coming through tied to your movements that drive it forward. So it's one of the ways we think that it's one level of interactivity, and I think that's just, further on, those kinds of things will lead further into the virtual world space. But it's a tough moment for interactive designers because you can't spend $1 million on a product and sell it for $1. It's very hard.
Yeah.
There were times when you could.
Oh, those were the days.
Those were the days. And then we have one last question from Scott. Actually, Scott, do you want to read your own question?
Oh, I'm not sure which one that is. Go right ahead.
All right. It says, Mark, what products today are really thoughtful to children following some of what you're sharing?
Well, Toca Boca still really rings the bell. Say it again. Oh, Adoki. Yeah, I really love the Adoki products. Busy, was it Busy Shapes and Crazy Gears and
Edekai.
What?
Edekai Academy.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, they really just I do have a set that I'd recommend to people because the kids immediately dive in and they're learning as they go. So those are some of my favorites. There was some fun. There was a company that just folded that was doing interactive lap bar, and I'm blanking out on their name, but they had some.
OK Play, maybe.
OK Play, thank you.
Yeah.
OK Play had some fun things that you did together, but they couldn't make a business out of it, and that was pretty interesting. Well, thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you too.
Joining, and please.
We just got one more question.
Oh, one more.
Yeah. All right, this is going to be the last question, and then we
don't go away.
Tiffany asks, what are some future goals for Canoe? Where do you see this in 5 years?
Well, we did the hard part of building our connection network. That was really a lot of work, hooking up grandparents and grandchildren in a way that keeps them engaged regularly. And now as I said, we're moving over onto the wand because there's so many more things we can do with the wand. You can use it on the network and you can use it off. So we're evolving over into working with book publishers and other people along. So that's sort of where Canoe is evolving to. And we have to follow the marketplace, and it's somewhat tricky getting grandparents to sign up. And it's much easier when we tell them about the wand. Most grandparents say, oh, I'll buy one for each of my grandkids. And, we won AARP's most innovative product of the year last year. And so we're connected to grandparents and kids at the same time. So I think we're going to continue to follow out all of what we've learned there. So, thank you.
That's awesome. Well, before we all go, let me share a couple of things. We are a community of people who care greatly about making quality products for children. Let me make a couple of recommendations. First, if you'd like to connect with other like-minded folks, enter your LinkedIn URL into the chat. If you happen to be looking for someone to fill a role on your team, maybe a link to your job board. Also, to help deepen your own professional learning, consider joining CMA. As I mentioned earlier, we're a nonprofit organization that brings great conversations together to help everyone in the field up their game. If you're in the interactive media space, we recommend that you would join the Bay Area chapter of CMA, where we'll have many other similar events in the future, workshops, talks, presentations, and in-person events, which for those that are outside the Bay Area, there's a lot of content that you could still participate in that is not in person. We welcome you all to join and be part of our community. Thank you all so much for those that are members and all those who attended to make this a successful event. And wherever you are, we wish you all the best in creating successful products children love, wherever you are. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.